So, and I think we are live here back at the Frenzel piano on Monday. It's today, the 3rd of June 2019, practicing session number, I don't remember which one. So we're going to practice again Beethoven third sonata, I should say, C major sonata. Last movement, it's the last time I will bring this on the practicing sessions. I think the piece is settling a little bit. So we're going to dive in that in a minute. So all of this in the framework now of the Beethoven project. That's the project in which I'm going to record, or have the privilege to record, I should say, all solo works from Beethoven, written by Beethoven, 60 works in total, and that starts the end of this year in 22 CDs. And of course, we're going to digitally distribute that music as well, and later also produce some vinyl discs from that series. So these practicing sessions are wonderful for me to share these things with you, opening a little bit my kitchen, so to say, the process of the way to that moment. And in these practicing sessions, all kinds of things can happen. So these are not ready performances. I'm just sharing with you, as the title of these live streams or practicing sessions, my practicing with you. So normally Monday, 7:30 p.m. live here at the Frenzel or at the Fritz in a few weeks, hopefully. Praying for that to happen, and Thursdays also at the clavichord pre-recorded sessions. So things might change over the summer and summer holiday, a little bit of a break for me also, but that I will announce as soon as possible. So saying hello to you in the chat, which is always one of the great things. Actually, the live stream is connecting with you, and during these practicing sessions there is a little bit less connection with us because I'm actually playing and sharing my thoughts, which is difficult when I read the chat live. But you know, we end in 30 minutes with practicing, and then I'll come back in the chat. So if you have questions for me, or just for each other, because the community is coming together here, and besides talking on the weather or nice food, which I read with pleasure, or Anya, she's moderating, that's my wife, you can ask each other questions about music as well, because we have a lot of people who are really not knowledgeable about the things that we are doing, which is great. So I'm saying hello to Jonathan. As always, nice to see you guys here. And Mikael is here. So Anya Schouteden, that's my wife. She's moderating the chat. Sylvia Pakifizzo, I hope I pronounced your name correct. And I think there's a new name in the live streams, which is cool. Welcome here. Ethan Miller, also a name that I don't recall from the live stream, but I don't have always a good sight of who's attending the live streams, since, as I said, I'm not always reading the chat. But if you're new here, great to have you. And Mr. Handel is here also, so what a privilege. Sina from Gothenburg, Joseph Davidson, always nice to see you. Emmy is here from Finland. Surgio, also very nice to see your name here back. Bruno Gonçalves, greeting from Brazil. Great to have you. Christian Vodak is here. So that's great to have you all. And I think people will join when YouTube is sending these notifications out. So and that's another thing I should mention. If you want to be notified for these live streams, you have to set your notification system by hitting that bell icon next to the subscription button. On mobile, it's a different setup than on your desktop, so you have to do both if you want to be notified on your mobile as well. It's not a difficult procedure, but YouTube is not actually, and I don't think that's a good way, is cutting or is making a bridge between the subscriber of a channel. And so if you subscribe to a channel, normally you want to see the content that channel is uploading. Of course, they had to trim that a little bit, because if you are subscribed to, let's say, 20 or 30 or 40 channels, that would, I mean, your inbox would be a total mess. So YouTube is actually guiding the notifications based on your view history. But even that is being reduced now, as they want to have control apparently on what you are about to see and not yourself. So it's a little bit of a system that I don't like. So, but they have this bell icon, and there you can set your heart notification that you still want to have a notification every time we go live or upload a video. Dag is here. Always great to see you. Martin Bennett. Hello, and he writes, during last week I had a look at this movement. I'm interested how you handle the tempo. Could not make good sense of the second subject. Okay, great, I'm going to do that. So what I'm going to do today is just play this piece once. And actually I was practicing before the live stream started and it went very nice. You know, if you have the privilege of working a little bit longer on a certain movement or a certain piece, suddenly there comes a moment in which the tempo, whatever tempo you choose, I mean, we are obviously, I am guided by the metronome numbers. So the tempo indications in this case by Czerny or Moscheles. But that's a free choice, of course, for you to do. But regardless of the tempo that you choose to play this piece in, there comes a moment in which you feel that suddenly everything falls together, comes together, falls on a certain line, certain perpetuum mobile actually that's being introduced. So things seem to be much easier than they were before. Now that can be totally over when I start playing before these microphones, because it adds always a little bit of, we are here, of course, amongst ourselves. There is no one watching from the outside. No, just kidding. But still, it's a kind of performance that I'm adding now to actually what should be only a practicing session. That's difficult to keep those two separate. But other than that, things went very nice, very relaxed. And what typically is the case, then I have always the feeling that I'm slowing down. So that might sound weird regarding the options that we take here on the channel, but this relaxed feeling is a good feeling, because if you then check your tempo that you actually want to achieve, oftentimes you are spot on then. And that's a sign, major sign, that things are moving into the right direction. So that are we going to do. So not making a too long session, because I have a video call actually at 20:30. So I have to, and that's a good thing, I think, also for the kids who have to go to bed because it's school time, so that we have a kind of hour to stop. Before I start, I want to say thank you to Marchio. He was in the live stream last week, and he actually reached out to me not only during the live chat, but also in the comment box. He said there is a kind of weird thing with this edition, that there is a place where Czerny here, or Simrock, adds a B flat, where other editions and also the manuscript and the first print have actually a B natural, and that's correct. It's this place. So B natural, and here Czerny or Simrock adds a B flat. Sorry. So that's, I don't know if this was a choice by Czerny or not. Anyway, we're going to follow obviously the manuscript of the first print. That's I think a no-brainer. And I checked Jenker. So it's correct. I made this mistake here, but this is kind of note that once you heard it, it's perfectly possible. So it escapes my attention. So thank you, Marchio, for correcting me on this. Okay, and then last thing before we start playing is that I will play with the closed lid of the piano. And the reason I'm doing that is actually, it totally was by accident that I was playing today with the closed lid. Normally the piano is half open. Do you see that? Let me check here on the picture. Yeah, you can see that. So you have these parts come over the piano. And that's obviously the piano is closed fully, but you can open this. I will not destroy so yeah, I will not do it, but you can open the piano up to here as well, which is a nice in between the piano, really open and not fully closed. But as you can see, actually this desk here is designed in a way it rests against these parts of the lid, which is interesting. And it was one of the things that caught my attention when I had this piano for a few weeks. Suddenly I saw that this fitted, and it's stupid. I mean, it may be weird that I'm saying that, because it makes so much sense now. But if you open the piano, this desk is really it's not very strong. So writing fingerings on the desk here is difficult. It will just fall backwards. Now it has this support which is designed like that. It's no, and in fact the piano sounds really nice when it's closed. The one thing that is so difficult for me to share that sound with you is that the microphones, they don't like that sound. They miss upper tones. They may, and certainly in the higher range, the piano sounds a little bit, I wouldn't say dull, but less vibrant, less brilliant. But it has one major consequence, which I only realized today. We were talking during the last practicing sessions a lot about making legato, certainly in the octaves, without using the pedal and also without using finger substitutions, which is really hard. Like for instance, for those of you who haven't attended those sessions, you have here starts this beautiful melodic line on the left hand. It's difficult to have these octaves sound really cantably without adding a little bit of pedal or at least some finger substitutions. So we were struggling with that a little bit, also not knowing. Chern is not indicating that in this edition, but yeah, does that mean that he would exclude that by definition? Actually, we should look to his pianoforte school, what he has to say about this. Certain similar passages actually there. But yeah, that's a matter of interpretation. I think it's always good to just stick with an idea for a while and see how far it will bring you. But now with the piano closed, it suddenly changes because although the sound is less that of a concert piano, it's more intimate, these problems in making legato and making sound becomes also a little bit less problematic. That's a great thing. So the details that you might be struggling with, they fall behind a certain curtain. So they become a little bit invisible, which is actually a great thing. And now you might say, well, obviously the piano is designed to sound, to give its full potential when open. That's correct. And that's no doubt. I mean, the piano open sounds more brilliant than when it's closed. But I'm just wondering, and I don't know, how these pianos were used domestically. So when Czerny made fingerings for these sonatas, it's interesting to know whether his piano was closed or not. My guess would be yes, because it's a piano open, it has a lot of sound, but compared to a piano closed, it's more intimate, but it's also less fatiguing. You can play longer. It's my experience. So I don't know, but I thought this thought is interesting to share with you. So I'll play the piece with the closed lid now. That's actually a very long introduction to say only this. Okay, tempo 116. So tactus inequalis again. Done. So let me first just check my tempo. That's something I often do. It's spot on 116 in whole beat, of course. That's a good sign, because certainly at the end I had the impression that it felt so relaxed that I fell back a little bit in tempo, but it wasn't. Okay, I hope you like that performance. Hope so. If not, I have a problem. Now, serious. What for me, this is a kind of basic foundation. Now, all kinds of little things can do. I have to practice a little bit the difficult things. Honestly, I'm not practicing this music really technical. That's one of the big advantages of whole beat. Not that it's really simple, because that's being presented as such, that if you play in double beat or whole beat, that things become really, really simple. It's not, but of course it becomes simpler. It's more simple than, or easier than when you want to achieve these very, very high tempi. But even then you have to practice. And certainly if you go to pieces like the Hammerklavier, that's even in whole beat really difficult music. But here, for instance, these jumps and these Viennese pianos, and the Fritz is even worse on that. And even I asked Joris to bring the keyboard, the original one, to check if the upper keys are so small and so long that they're not designed to really position your hand when jumping. So for instance, if you this G sharp, for instance, you have to position your finger really, really carefully, because otherwise you just will glide off the key, which happened while I was playing. So those things I have to practice. But other than that, we can think about introducing a little bit of tempo rubato. Not saying that you should, in this kind of music, certainly in the presto, Allegro Assai, or these faster movements, that you should do too much. But of course you have some breathing that can be introduced, I think. But I'm not allowing myself to do that unless I have really the feeling that my basic tempo, my basic movement is solid, because that will ensure that the piece holds together as a unity, which is really important. So let me just go to the chat here and see what grade you gave me. Hopefully an A. Okay. Just scrolling to the chat. So if you have something to ask also for this piece, just do it now. We have a delay in live, so that you will see, or you will hear me talk about 30 seconds later than happens in real life. So, okay. Just reading your jokes. Tom is here, working on a metronome even. It's a great project. So Martin, I hope I answered a little bit also your question on the second theme. I don't think that the second theme in this tempo really poses a problem. The only thing you have to do, and you have to develop actually if you play in whole beat or in double beat, is to be patient and not to, if you have this kind of so not want to push a little bit. No need for that. how Beethoven uses octaves all the time, and then suddenly there's only one note, and it's so joyful, that one note modulation to C major, and then. So oftentimes in these kinds of melodies, the feeling of unity is not what you would expect in the later 19th century. I sometimes call that a post-Wagnerian way of playing, in which you have these long bows, and as a musician you have to apply a certain tempo rubato, which is made or designed to speed up while this bow is going up in tension, and you come down, even if the sentence lasts 24 bars, then you have this bow of tension. I think that's much later 19th century and the early 18th century, or even here end of the 18th century. You had more the feeling of this calm, of this peace within the beat, within the schlag, within so and this unity, if you want to do something at the end of a phrase, just holding back a little bit is often enough to create this feeling of the sentence ends. And that's of course what you want to achieve as a musician, to make clear where it begins and where the sentence ends. So accent, and then so also this mere rhythmical joy. I think that's a feeling. Of course, can't prove that, but I think that kind of joy that's within, so the rhythmical aspects, that's really something stylistically related to this kind of music, and it has to do with accentuation, with articulation, and those are the main tools actually to create the atmosphere. And it's very far away from, I mean, if you speed tempo up really a lot, and in this piece is sometimes played really, really fast. I think even Pollini reaches single beat in this. Then that palette of the subtle articulation and accentuation and this intrinsic and this internalized rhythmical joy is actually falling away for a kind of, well, very basic rhythmical pattern actually. And that's how I feel it. I'm not criticizing Pollini here, and by no means that's not what I want to do, but that's just how I feel it. Okay, Jonathan asked what tempo modulus gives. That will be not so much different than Czerny, and they are oftentimes really, really close. Let me just check, because I honestly don't know from memory. Let me see if I've written. So Czerny has 1/116. Czerny has made 3 or 4 or 5 editions actually. The Simrock is a complicated history, but he has. The great thing is that he made several metronomizations for the work of Beethoven, which is great because now we can check what the evolution within his lifetime was. So also the tempi he gave in his pianoforte school are of the slower side. The earlier tempi he gave, the Haslinger edition, are on the faster side. So that's, and not that the range is really enormous, but there is a difference. And you know, tempo decides everything. Changing the tempo is changing everything, really, and certainly the character. And the more you come to this sweet spot, I would say, the more you will notice that changing a little bit in tempo or a movement is changing a lot. So differences in change of tempo become bigger once you are reaching this sweet spot of a piece. That's my experience, at least. So Czerny gives 116, as he does here, and 120 it might be the Haslinger, I don't know. And the Moschus gives 116 as well. So it's in this Simrock edition 116 for the quarter note, and not for the dotted quarter note, but that's actually, you could do a study with that. I'm not saying that in every case a quarter note 116, in the case of a ternary time signature or note value, that obviously a dotted note is meant, but in this case comparing it to other metronome numbers by Cheney in which he gave a dotted quarter note, and often is of course making the case for also applying it here. Besides the fact that giving quarter note 116 for a ternary time signature or note value doesn't, I mean, how are you going to interpret that? But oftentimes you will see that the room for the dot in the print is left blank. So it's meant to have a dot there. So it has to do with printing issues and sometimes, but that's a common thing you will find. It's not a mistake though. So that's modulus. Below gives also something of that. It's not written here, so, but it's interesting to compare those metronome numbers. Okay. Rastislav is here as well. And Sylvia's writing, I think, in Portuguese, which I can't read. That's and Sergio's here as well. And Miriam asked, can you ask Wim what is the exact tempo written, please? So that were the metronome numbers. Beethoven gives Allegro Assai, which is more Allegro than normal Allegro. So that's the official, I would say. And Anya is writing that she's going to ask something, but I think that was the question. Okay. Yeah. Sergio's also writing, yeah, makes things simpler. I'm interacting most with this channel on YouTube. Yeah, so we will have in the future, like we had a Q&A session last 2 Thursdays ago, I think. It was, I think, we had those back in the days, and so reintroducing them once a month, I think it's a nice thing. Also for me, I just have to sit behind my computer reading your questions, or we just hang out with each other. So that's actually a plan I'm having for the future. Okay. If there's nothing really on your mind, I see you have a great time in the chat. Here, Mikael, always when I'm closing the live stream, there comes a new question, which is not a problem for me. But so it might sound weird if you listen to the ending of the live stream and then there's another question. But I want to address those questions that are coming now. So Mikael asks, how do you know whether the metronome numbers must be read whole beat or not? Well, that's a personal view, of course, of me and Lorenz, that in the 19th century, 90% of the metronome numbers are whole beats. We have talked about Vincent Novello, and I will bring that on the channel again. We have metronome numbers from Vincent Novello, who published Haydn masses and Mozart masses. Actually, music that at the time he published it in 1820 and so on wasn't published. So he wanted to safeguard that music and be aware that it didn't get lost. So he traveled to Salzburg and Vienna. He even met Constanze there. There was a beautiful story in his diary where he describes how both of them arm in arm walked actually in the moonlight. And she was very happy that someone came from England interested in so much in her late husband's music. So that's actually an incredible story. And then he traveled to Salzburg, I think, where Nannerl still lived. He there saw the clavichord, where Mozart and she obviously had played a lot of duets on. He touched the original keyboard. Of course, that's lost. And so all to say that he traveled to the people who were closest to Mozart, also for asking how this music should be performed. So we can imagine from Nannerl that he returned with a lot of information. And so his metronome numbers are really interesting. And if you compare those with similar notations, because that's, of course, the stupid thing that he was the first to publish, and neither Moscheles, Czerny, or Hummel, or Ries, of those people have published them again. So, but if you compare similar notations of Novello to Hummel or other composers, it's exactly half. So that's weird, because also Novello was not a Mr. Unknown. He was very known in London. Moscheles, Mendelssohn, they were friends in his house, played concerts there. So they met. It's almost a story like the Straube-Reger story of 1900, 1915 that we had an interview with Marcel Punt a few years ago. It's almost similar, that you have two sets of metronome numbers by people who knew each other. But other than that, Novello, you have some other examples in the 19th century. Organ music is something that we have to look into. There was a change, certainly towards single beat. And from the 1870s onwards, you can see that that trend is bigger and bigger. Hanot exercises exactly half of Czerny's metronomization, and I don't think he meant to have it to write exercises that were half as difficult as Czerny. So that's 1870, very early on. But other than that, it's by comparing and also understanding the notation, what is actually meant, which is also not easy, because you are in a time here where the metronome is needed, like Beethoven said. I will bring that quote. It's a wonderful quote that he said: the metronome is necessary because we've lost somehow. We have too many ideas to fit into what was considered to be the tempo ordinario. And now that's a really cool sentence expressed by Beethoven. So the metronome was needed because you had this whole range of ideas that actually didn't fit really 100% in any notation. So to make really clear what the tempo originally the composer had in mind was, the metronome was necessary. Although, if you see metronomizations by Czerny and Moscheles, and everybody who talks about tempo research will bring those two names up because they are the most important ones. The great thing is that they metronomized similar works separately from each other, and their metronome numbers are in the range of, you could say, well, 5 to 10%. If you consider that not to be a major difference, then I think 70 or 80% of their metronome numbers are in the same line. So they understood, apparently, what the notation was about. So that's an extensive answer to your question, Mikhail, but it's the way I think you can solve these problems. Lang Jones says Assai means very, so Allegro Assai, it's obviously, yeah. So there's a discussion that goes back to the 19th century, even if Assai means more or less. If you apply it to adagio, of course, it's more adagio. It's slower. If you connect it with allegro, it's more allegro. In tempo, it is faster. There's no discussion about that. So Allegro Assai is faster in tempo than a normal allegro. The question is, what's a normal allegro? If you read then Czerny, again, in his pianoforte school, he gives 10 or 12 grades of allegro, starting with a very ruhig, so very calm. So that's the thing, joyful as well. Here I can imagine that it's joyful. So if that's the character of the piece indicated by allegro, because keep in mind that these tempo words were tempo words, but they were actually in the first place character words. So they expressed also certain characters. So. But Allegro Assai is faster than Allegro, there's no doubt about that. But how much and where you start from, that's actually the whole thing. Jason writes, Harry Smart, that's the brother, I think, no, of George Smart, metronomized a lot of organ. I think you've sent that to me. That's indeed, yeah, good that you remind me of that story. It's on my computer, I should check that. Organ music is really something apart, and Mendelssohn's organ music, it's hard to say. I think it's very well possible that it's single beat. If you compare that again with similar movements, it appears that his piano music and his music for orchestra, which he metronomized, was double of that of his organ music. But again, that's something we have to be looking into much more closely. Okay, I'm just scrolling through your chat here. Federico writes, I was studying the number 5 and all the interpretations I found were too far. Yeah, number 5 of Czerny probably you mean. That's great. Yeah, and about Czerny etudes, that's really cool actually. Those etudes that now every Friday comes one of those. We have the first 10 actually set up. There will just be released one after another every week. But that people actually share links to performances which are great, saying, well, single beat is obviously possible. And if you listen to those performances, there was one of a lady in the 70s, unbelievably great technique. I've actually rarely heard someone play that well. I mean, on its own, it was fascinating to listen to. It was kind of Glenn Goldish kind of technique. I don't remember her name. And so I understand if you listen to such a performance and you think, well, obviously it's possible in single beat. And besides that, it's not a discussion about whether it is possible or not. The technical difficulties where if you want to apply single beat that you will run into is only secondary, I think. You have to start understanding the original tempo indications from within the notation. But anyway, I checked those tempi and they were between 25% and 50% too slow, which is on its own remarkably fast. And that's this magical line of 12, 13 notes a second that these people keep running into. And for those of you who haven't seen that video that I made on what kind of title that I gave it, where Chopin and Beethoven fit for their music or something like that. I discussed sources from the 17th to the 19th century, which the maximum notes per second were given as 10. The end of the 19th century, that was increased to 12. But 12, 13 notes, it's a magical barrier, actually. You can surpass that for short runs, but not in a complete etude, apparently. So it's really, really fast sometimes. Actually, often. And the same applies for slow movements. People say for slow movements it doesn't work. It's something that keeps coming up. And the strange thing is that from the recordings that goes back to the earliest ones, the only thing that they seemed to agree upon was keeping the slow tempi kind of slow. For the rest, we see an increase in speed. I will bring also a story on Chopin's metronome numbers soon, given by, was it Friedman or Friedheim? This Liszt student, his name escapes me, the correct name. But his metronomization for the Chopin etudes is really interesting. He keeps the slow. It's single beat, I think. I'm not sure, but I can imagine. And he keeps the slow movements almost at whole beat. That's really, really strange. So for the slow movements, you have the similar technical difficulties, and those are kept the longest from speeding up. So it's sometimes it's just the reverse of what we think, and that's so funny. If you once see that, you see it everywhere. This pattern. That's actually fun to do. Always think that's my way of thinking. I hope I don't come across to you as someone who makes up his mind. Of course, if I bring a video on YouTube, I have made up my mind. I'm not doubting when bringing that subject. But it's so cool to just sit on a chair, and it's actually Clemens von Gleich, who and let me not put my water on the piano, who was one of the Talsma adepts. I mean, we were very good friends. And of course, Talsma, that's a theory, goes back to the 80s, a variable use of the metronome number. I think it's proven cannot be right from itself. But anyway, he was a brilliant mind. And he said, every day you should sit on a chair and doubt for 10 minutes everything you think it's true. And I remembered that. And, you know, I met him when I was 22 or something like that. It's a great age to meet people like him, because I do that. It's such a nice exercise. Just doubt everything. Take the opposite position of what you think might be true, and then suddenly you see a perspective, and you can turn this perspective around as many times as you want. And that's a cool thing with music, because you can just simply play. It is free of any cost. So it's so fascinating, actually. Okay. Yeah. So Hori Gaida writes, sometimes I hear in meters like 6/8 individual eighth notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, rather than triplets. You have to keep an eye on the time. And that's totally correct. So 12/8, but then we are actually in the 18th century. Though still in the 19th century, people were aware of that. Chopin was reading J.S. Bach's book, you know. But anyway, so 12/8 is the fastest eighth note structure time signature. There, you use that, as Kirnenberger writes, as to replace the 4/4 common time, not to have to write triplets all the time. But other than that, 9/8, 6/8, 3/8, you should refrain of going so fast that you hear only one pulse every 3/8 notes, because then you're losing the effect originally designed for that time signature. So that's really important. Also, you jump, if you played that would be single beat, then you would actually, if that's a notation that would exist so fast, I don't think so, but then you would be in a 2/8 time signature. And that's cool, because Lawrence now is calling me. Actually, I can show it. I'm not faking this. Lawrence. No, all the world, the entire world has his cell phone number, so he wouldn't mind be called. So jump, pum, 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 pum. It's essential. 6/8. Of course, throughout the 19th century, you lose a little bit this original meaning, but not in Beethoven. Beethoven didn't make mistakes in noting down. So he was not only a genius in composition. Okay. So Miriam says, please give the note value and tempo every time you play in the practicing session. Okay, I will remember that. Most of the times I'm doing that. I did also, I think, at the beginning here. And I hope you like that I'm doing that with the standalone recordings now. I think it's a cool feature just to start the metronome ticking. It's cool to watch, I think. And yeah, music stands on its own. That's true. But it becomes so clear for, I think, people who watch the work that we are doing here, that it's also tempo related, that just having the metronome ticking few seconds shows the connection with the performance. Yeah, I hope you like that idea, actually. Yeah, Tom speaks about a waltz. Waltz tempo is a different. That's a dance movement. So in 3/8, the tempi for the waltzes and the Viennese time are no exception, between 80 and 88 for the dotted half note. So that's actually faster than you would have for a normal 3/4. But that's because it's named a waltz. And even if it's not named a waltz, you should recognize that's a waltz. So that's typical dance tempo. Okay, guys. Big smiley from Tom. You're welcome. So hope you liked this session. It was a little bit different than other times, but I thought just presenting this final stage where it's not ready the piece, but I feel a little bit more comfortable in the things I'm doing, feeling the unity a little bit more than I was feeling it last week. And as always, I didn't practice that piece too much. So much is going on these days. So these practicing sessions keep me a little bit alive, also because I'm practicing a lot of music for the Beethoven project now. So on Thursday there is a pre-recorded session that's already there. Then we're moving toward July, August, and then the schedule is going to change a little bit regarding the practicing sessions, but that I will announce when time has come. So thanks for being here, supporting also the work we do on Patreon. That's always very cool, because the Patreons now, they actually keep us going. if I made time to do this, is thanks to the patrons and also thanks to you watch. But of course, that's something of life, that things need to be sustainable, and that's really great. So if you have just 1 minute time visiting our Patreon page, that would be nice. Okay, that was it for today. See you soon again. Bye.